Alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Page 50. Today I'm going to start with experiments. It is the part of basically the methods or the research methods which is used to collect quantitative data. So let's get started. Experiments involve testing the relationship between different variables, things that can change under controlled conditions. The researcher manipulates independent variables to see whether they produce a change. Independent variable, they are not changed by the researcher. Any changes must be caused by a change in the independent variable. So the very first thing about the experiment, it's all about the variables. What are the variables? Variables are the factors which affect any change. And there are two kind of variables: dependent variables or independent variables. Obviously independent variables are those factors, are the measuring tools which are not depending on anything, and dependent variable obviously are the factors which are dependent on independent variables. So experiments therefore are based on changing an independent variable and measuring any later change in the dependent variable. This relationship can be one of the two types. So see, we need to understand one thing. First of all, it's all about the variables. Secondly, there are two type of variables: dependent variables and independent variables. So basically, whatever is required to understand when a researcher change an independent variable. So obviously we need to see which kind of change occurred in in this result. For instance, if I have an independent variable and I have certain dependent variables, so if I simply change an independent variable, so I need to understand if that independent variable was there, so this kind of variables are changed. But when I change another independent variable, so what will be the change in future? So basically it is the relationship of dependent variable and independent variable. And when they are depending on each other, for instance, one can say that there are two types of things which can be observed. The relationship can be one of the two types. Correlation occur when two or more things happen at roughly the same time. These only suggest a relationship, however, because it is possible for them to occur by chance. So what is correlation? Its correlation is all about the chance. That's if two things happen at the same time by chance. It is not by planning. So this is called correlation. You can say that, oh, it's coexistence, oh, it's a coincidence. So there are so many things we used to say. So correlation, it's all about the relationship of independent variable and dependent variable. And as a result, if both things happen at the same time and at the same way, so one can say that this is called correlation. So correlation, the definition: when research shows a relationship or connection between two or more variables. Causation. What is causation? Causation, it's all about the causes. Causation involves the idea that when one action occurs, another always follows. Causal relationships are powerful because they allow a researcher to predict the future behavior of something. So see that, if you work hard, obviously you will get a good grade, because if you work hard, it's the cause. If you want to get good grades, what is the cause behind that? You need to work hard. For instance, if the inflation, or you can say the prices are jacked up, so many prices, high prices, so what is the causation? Automatically things will be far more difficult for poor people to sustain their life. So causation, it's all about the action and reaction. Correlation, it's all about the relationship between different kinds of variables. Either it is dependent or with independent variables to dependent variable. It is not always easy to distinguish between correlation and causation in the real world of sociological research, because things often happen at the same time by chance or coincidence. However, there are two ways to separate correlation from causality: test and retest a relationship. The more times a test is replicated with the same result, the greater the chances that the relation is causal. Use different groups with exactly the same characteristics: an experimental group whose behavior is manipulated, a control group whose behavior is not manipulated. And see that when we talk about the experimental group or control group, don't you think it's the same like independent variable are dependent variable? If we talk about experimental group, So it is manipulated, it is dependent. Experimental group, it's all about they are dependent on whom? A control group whose behavior is not manipulated, right? So basically you can say control group is all about the independent variable, and experimental group it's all about dependent variable. So this is, I mean, you have in experiment, it's the simple experiments. We have so many different kind of experiments, I mean, in sociological research. The next one is laboratory experiment. Laboratory experiment takes place in a closed environment where conditions can be precisely monitored and controlled. This ensures that no outside or uncontrolled variables affect the relationship between the dependent and the independent variable. These kind of experiments are unusual in sociology because they involve an artificial created situation, and so it is unlikely that the findings will apply to the real world. Participant will be aware that research is taking place and this will affect how they behave. Laboratory experiments also arise ethical issues about the permission consent. So what is laboratory experiments? Is laboratory experiments are not considered to be very valid, especially as far as the sociology is concerned, because in sociology we hardly have a scientific approach to understand different scenarios. So this is not recommended, I mean, in sociology. But still, I mean, there are certain things which can be judged through experimentation. And when we talk about the laboratory experimentation, it's a kind of artificial because you try to enclose the environment. It is very controlled environment. It is all the things that control, and not external force or factor is involved in laboratory experimentation. So that is the reason this is not valid and this is not required to be done in sociology more often. Field experimentation are more appropriate for sociological research because they are not conducted in a closed controlled environment. Contrary to laboratory experimentation, we got field experimentations. In field experimentation, obviously you are outside. It's all about your external activity. You don't have anything to be restricted. I mean, in field experimentation, it is very difficult to control all possible independent variables in a natural setting, which means that natural experiment tend to establish correlation rather than causation. However, the basic principle of the experiments are the same. Researchers use dependent and independent variable to test hypotheses or answer a research question. So one can say that it's all about the field experimentation. When we talk about the field experimentation, it's obviously the outside. I mean, things are difficult to control in field experimentation. One thing. Second thing, it is more natural. It is more natural when we talk about the field experimentation. It is recommended. Obviously, the surveys which are conducted, most of the surveys are conducted in reference to field experimentation, when you people have to interact with other people and just try to get the desired result. Uh, so obviously one can say that it is the kind of thing which is difficult because in field experimentation you have a kind of atmosphere like a scientific method. As natural sciences are the scientific, you can say study, one can say that it's all about the hypothesis. You simply test and retest, then you deduce something, you got some kind of results, then again testing. So field experimentation is more likely to be the scientific experimentation, like you are working in a scientific subject or natural sciences. So to test the hypothesis that teacher expectation influence how well their students do in school, Rosenthal and Jacobson conducted a study of low educational achievement in children. The dependent variable was their level of achievement, and the independent variable was the expectation that teachers had about the ability of their students. Rosenthal and Jacobson manipulated the independent variable by pretending to be psychologists who could, on the basis of a sophisticated IQ test, identify children who would display dramatic intellectual growth. So it's all about, see that in the field experimentation, the example which is given in this article, it's all about by the Jacobson and the Rosenthal. According to them, one can say that the teacher conduct a survey. Our teacher can simply conduct observation, because when you are teaching so many students, one can see that you can simply judge what is the dependent variable. What is dependent variable? You want to see, you want to judge people's IQ. I mean, so a person has a good IQ or a high IQ level, one can say that your teacher has more expectation towards that student, because he or she is considered to be more hardworking, more intellectual, more creative, more you can say that innovative, right? So the strength, laboratory experimentation are easier to replicate than field experimentation, because the researcher has more control over both the research condition and the variables being tested. Standardized research conditions give experiments a high level of reliability. Experiments can also create powerful, highly valid statements about behavior based on cause and effect relationship. Field experiment can be used to manipulate situation in the real world to understand the underlying reason for everyday behavior. So one of the strength of the experiment, first of all, you need to identify two different type of experimentation. In laboratory experimentation, it's always easy to replicate. For instance, I am conducting anything in laboratory because I have a closed controlled atmosphere, so I will get the same result as you will try to do the same experimentation in laboratory. So in laboratory, replication is very easy, you will get the same result, so it's always good to have the same results, so one can say that it's more valid or more reliable. But on the other hand, if we talk about the field experimentation is all about the situation based experimentation. I mean, it's a real world. If you want to know something about the behavior of individual or a group of people or a community, how the community behave in a certain scenario, you can say that field experiment is far more better as compared to laboratory experimentation, because in field experimentation it's quite easy, it's not a rocket science at all. In field experimentation, you interact people, you know something, you judge. For instance, what about the variables? I mean, the person is rich, okay, educated, variable. Live in an urban area, again, it's a variable. So there are so many variables you can test and apply into your research if we talk about the field experimentation. But still, we got some limitations. It can be difficult to control all possible influences on behavior even in a laboratory setting. A simple awareness of being studied, for example, may introduce an uncontrolled independent variable into an experiment. The Hawthorne or observer effect, named after a study by Mayo at the Hawthorne factory in Chicago, refers to changes in people's behavior directly resulting from their knowledge of being studied. So this is very important definition. What is Hawthorne effect? It is Hawthorne effect is a kind of effect which is, see that, for instance, I'm sitting in front of a camera, so I'm more conscious that you are instance, so many people are watching me. So the camera is a variable or a tool which can influence my behavior. So if we talk, like, it is possible when we are sitting in front with friends, our language, our tone, our behavior is entirely different, because we know we are sitting in friends and we are not you can say we are not recorded. But when you people record something, you got some sort of awareness that now I'm sitting in front of a camera, so obviously my behavior will be changed. You know why? In the presence of cameras. So this is called Hawthorne effect. Understand what is Hawthorne effect? Hawthorne effect is an effect on observer, when especially he considered that now he is studied, he is in a limelight, he is recorded, right? So this kind of thing is called Hawthorne effect. uh, so, I mean, one can say that this is I have for the experimentation. Before I wrap up the whole stuff, I need to tell you, experimentation is one of the very important tool which sociologists use to understand behavior as well as statistical data. For instance, all the experimentation which is conducted in a closed environment in a laboratory, it's all about the quantitative data, numbers, digits, rate, ratio, right? When we talk about the field experimentation, it is more likely to be quantitative, plus you can say that a bit qualitative as well, because when you are watching, observing people and just try to notice their behavior in a specific situation, our Hawthorne effect. So after having a Hawthorne effect in the field experimentation, one can say that it is easier for a researcher to convert the result, that convert the data into qualitative qualitative data, right? This we have for the experimentation. I hope to see you in my next video when we talk about the content analysis. Till then, take great care of yourself and the people around you. Fi aman Allah.